There's nothing quite as inspiring as learning from a great role model. For anyone aspiring to become an international educator, our guests today, Hannah and Jared Keene, share invaluable insights backed by their careful planning and resourcefulness. We were truly impressed by their dedication as they begin their journey into international education. Join us as we hear their story, gain from their experiences, and uncover what it takes to thrive in the highly competitive world of international school recruiting. And by the way, did you listen to episode 87 with Diane Jacoutout of Edvectus, in which she unpacked what first-timers to international recruiting can experience? If you missed it, take a listen because it sets you up for this interview with the Keenes, who are mapping out their efforts to go global. Our guiding questions for this show were: what makes you so keen to go global? What steps are you taking to become international educators? Some of the topics covered include exploring the experiences, skills, and character strengths that inspired Hannah and Jared to pursue international teaching opportunities. Reflections on our thought experiment, Is International Teaching for Me? Blog post, with their candid responses sharing how the post helped clarify their motivations and readiness for an international teaching career. Insights into how they developed a purposeful recruiting plan, including the steps they are taking and resources they are utilizing to find the best fit. The role of a recruitment consultant in their search, how working with an expert is shaping their approach and easing their concerns about the process. Discussing their openness to various regions and countries around the world and how they weigh different options. How they applied resources like our blog post and spreadsheet, profiling schools, cities, and countries to clarify priorities and identify supportive environments. Focusing on their young children and their needs while also honoring their extended family in dealing with their desire to teach internationally. Check out our show notes to learn more about Hannah and Jared. This episode was recorded on August 21st, 2025. We now give you the thoughtful and proactive Keenes who are way ahead of where I was in the early days of my international school recruiting. They provide an excellent model of how to gather information, process, and plan for the big step of going global.
Well, hi, Hannah and Jared. It's so great to see you guys. Welcome to Educators Going Global. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. We're thrilled.
Yeah, so maybe, Hannah, can you just tell us, since you're in the same place, where in the world are you?
We are in Oregon.
Okay, and for our audience, these are two people who have yet to go overseas. They're aspiring international educators. We're very excited for them as they start their journey. So let's ask each of you, and we'll start with Jared, what led you to think, I want to go global?
I had a great experience in college. I'd done some traveling outside of the country, fortunately, but in college, I decided to go to Querétaro, Mexico, for 6 weeks for a study abroad where I was able to complete my second year of Spanish in this intensive immersion environment.
Cool.
And Querétaro is just north of Mexico City. It's very vibrant. It has colonial influence and architecture. It might have 3 universities. I went to only one of them. And it was just great to be in a very different culture than I was used to. I had perceptions as an American going south, but spending that much time with the people and the family I was with and other Americans as well, it was really eye-opening to how much there is outside of our borders and how great it can be to interact and learn from other cultures.
That's such a great opportunity. And I think it's amazing that so many schools are offering sort of semester abroad type experiences. And I love the language immersion. That is absolutely the way to learn it in a hurry, isn't it? So lucky you. Awesome. Hannah, how about you?
Yeah, so in elementary school, I had a lot of teachers from Mexico, Puerto Rico, and Argentina. I was in a dual language program where I learned Spanish. And so from the get-go of my school experience, I was always learning about teachers coming from different places and doing other things, which really inspired my drive and fulfillment of traveling and exploring other cultures. And then I also participated in an international high school program as a student, going on later to pursue my Spanish degree in teaching, and kind of knowing that I had a lot more opportunities to either travel on breaks, or I had known some people that had international taught in the past. So I was really interested in a career that would allow me to continue to explore other cultures and go outside of where I grew up.
Okay, so you both speak Spanish. That's pretty cool. And David speaks Spanish, and I speak some Spanish too. So we could let's continuemos en español.
I'm a little more rusty than Hannah, but yeah.
I'm pretty rusty myself.
Well, let's start with a shout out. We're going to probably reference JP Mint, Jacqueline Malay, a couple times in this episode.
Woohoo!
But Querétaro is where she lives, and she's a Canadian, but she lives south of the border, and she speaks multiple languages and has learned Spanish. But we'll speak more to Jacqueline and her wealth of talents in just a second. All right, let's move right into our guiding questions, and we've got a couple. And I can see Audrey's been working on this one because she's always so good with the play on words. So here we go. So what makes you so keen to go global, and what steps are you taking to become international educators? And we're going to get to those big questions through some smaller questions. We're going to dig down a little bit. All right. You've kind of answered this question a little bit, but let's go a little bit deeper. So let's start with your life and your teaching experience, what they were like before you started getting serious about going overseas. So let's go a little bit more there, and let's get into your background and possibly talk about some more of your life experiences, skills you've picked up, character strengths that led you to be curious about teaching overseas. And I think we shared a blog post entitled Thought Experiment is International Teaching for Me. So maybe some takeaways from that. All right, Jared, why don't we go with you on this one? What's your kind of background that led you beyond going to Querétaro and learning Spanish? What are some other stories?
I've always felt really comfortable in school. It was a place for me as a student that I really enjoyed going. I didn't like being homesick. I had a number of teachers that I considered mentors, and I would go to them with problems throughout my middle and high school experience and elementary. And so then when Hannah became a teacher after we got married, I was kind of kicking around ideas as what to pursue after I got my bachelor's in English, and teaching felt like a really good fit. And I got into a great program here in Oregon, OSU Cascades. And it felt so comfortable, and I loved learning how to teach content that I enjoyed. And then fortunately, I had some colleagues that already had some experience, one in particular who then decided to go abroad. And then as you develop as a teacher, you get feedback from different administrators. And so I was taking in some of the feedback, and I would get positive remarks about my collaboration with colleagues and kind of my reflective nature and the amount of research that I would do, as well as my rapport with students. And so as Hannah and I talked as a young married couple about our teaching careers and our interests, we'd already traveled separately and we're saving to travel together. It just kind of clicked for us. I don't remember if it was a specific day or not, but we just realized we both had this passion and we could really pursue it through international teaching. The blog post was really fun for Hannah and I to read because the phrase that we loved was the stretch zone. Here we've developed a comfort in how to teach in an American classroom, specifically in, Western Oregon, and kind of how to maneuver the districts and the different pros and cons to that. And I think we're both professionally and personally looking for that kind of stretch zone, and international teaching, I think, could be a great avenue for that.
And you add in the character strength of curiosity and the lifelong learning as an educator, that you want to learn, you want to expand. And you're saying the next area for you is to go overseas to pursue what you're curious about. And one of the big things that we talk about again and again is the professional learning opportunities that you're going to get when you get overseas. It's phenomenal. So that's pretty cool. Hannah, how about you?
Yeah. So with the background of travel that my family had helped instill in us, and then also being in a dual language program, I think once I started my teaching career, I also was always listening to I'd have subs that had international taught, like they were back just subbing part-time, and somehow I'd caught wind, I was an international teacher, and I really would always ask more questions and want to hear more about their experience. And my question that I'd always end with was, well, why did you move back? Like, why did you come back? And typically the encouragement was always, do it. You should absolutely do it. No regrets doing it. And the biggest regret was always, I wish I had done it sooner. And so I think early on in my career, I had kind of taken those pieces and was like pocketing them as a portfolio. And I would keep building on that year by year as I'd make more connections with people. I also had a cousin that taught in both India and Jakarta and had a kid over there, her first child, and just listening to her experience as well. Really, my ears were always open for it and was really inspired and knew it was something that we wanted to do. But at that time, we were getting a message of, it's definitely good to be established, a couple years in your career. So maybe trying after like 2 to 3 years of experience. And then one thing led to another. You buy a house or you have a different milestone you're coming up on. And we're a bit closer to 10 years, but we're still like so motivated and eager to go for it.
That reminds me of all the people that I've worked with who have retired to Oregon. Bend is a place several have come to, and I think there are a couple other cities, so that's kind of a central place for a lot of international educators.
We just moved back from there a few years ago. Yeah. We moved over there for part of the time too. It's a great place. Yeah. So I think just from the blog post, the thought experiment is to international teaching for me that we were able to see through you guys. The stretch zone is something that Jared and I place a lot of value in, and we see what a positive impact it can have on us. But currently our big hope is what a positive impact it can have on our children. So that's probably the area that we're really looking forward to, even though for others, that's a really uncomfortable area.
Well, absolutely. And something we talked about off mic is how you see being overseas as such a great education. And, that's something we've talked about on our podcast is what a great education it is for our kids just to be in these international classrooms and see more of the world. And I think you've really hit on something important there is thinking about not stretching just yourselves, but also stretching your kids. So that's pretty cool. It's awesome that the two of you have both come to this excitement about going international. I can't imagine. I haven't really thought about it before, but if one person in the couple wanted to and the other didn't, that could be really difficult, really challenging. So I'm happy for you. So you have, from what we've talked off mic, you're quite intentional about this. You have taken quite a few steps and done some research already, which we applaud. So tell us some of the steps you've taken to this point. You haven't gone overseas yet, but there's a lot people can do. And we're talking here to any aspiring international educators. There's a lot you can do beforehand, even if you haven't been overseas before. And what are some resources you've used so far to find out more about it? And I think it's Hannah's turn to go first.
Okay. We have started, I will give Jared a lot of credit on this. He's done a lot of research and he's a podcast guy of the two of us too. And so he'll share with me the really big ones like your podcast and ones that have been really helpful in starting this. But part of it has been like a 5 to 10 year plan for us. So we're really planned out too. And part of that is just with kids and everything. So the research and everything is pretty thorough. And I would say what's been the most helpful has been looking through the blog posts. Jared's read some books. I'm getting started on a lot more of my research as well, joining social media. And then, of course, through your connection, JP Mint has been a huge, huge piece to getting to the point where we're getting prepared for recruiting season. And Jared, maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on the other things that you've been doing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you did great. You laid out like all the different pieces. I think of it because I teach social studies as well. I think of the timeline of it and the conversations for us, like Hannah mentioned. Yeah, we like to talk about, our 5-year plan, and COVID was pretty disruptive, and, you want to have a second kid. So you have a second kid and things get pushed back a bit. But for us, it was, for me, certainly podcasts, because I've got to maximize that time that I have. So I listen, I consume a lot through audio. So listened to a little bit of the International Teachers podcast, found their information funny and insightful, and then came across Educators Going Global, and then not just listening, but taking the time at night to go onto the websites. I think that's something with podcasts that a lot of people miss, unfortunately. They don't actually go to the website. It's like, that's the foundation. That's the landing page. You got to get there. The blogs are so helpful, the different resources and tools, which we'll get into in a little bit. And then from there, I'm not the most outgoing individual with people I don't know, but sending that email saying, hey, me and my wife are interested in pursuing this with our young family. What kind of feedback would you give on this scenario? And I sent one to you guys, which you respond to. I also sent one to ITP, which Greg Lemoyne responded to, which was awesome. So I think for people who are listening, in terms of the steps, get as much info as you can in the best way for you, because teachers were really busy. So I started with audio, with podcasts, then go to the websites. And then when you hear those pieces of how you can just look up a school's website and you can get a really good idea about the quality that you may find in these different locations based off of what they're trying to show you and how transparent they're trying to be. That's something I really enjoy. I love getting into the research. I was an English major, so I love reading and finding out more about different things. And that was one piece that it takes time, but it's worth it. The recruiting sites, then I've appreciated the coaching we got from JP Mint, because some of them can lead you down a trail that maybe is more expensive than you can afford, or maybe won't give you the information you want right away. And there's a lot they offer that's already free. And so I think I've looked at almost all of them. ISS, Teacher Horizons, Schroll, Search Associates, and then, there's another one, GRC, I think.
Yep.
So that's kind of the progression and the research that we've done and we continue to do. And yeah, JP Mint, she's been so incredibly helpful. We contacted her just by going to her website, scheduling a conversation last spring. She was incredibly thorough with us when we met via Zoom, with telling us how she was going to help us with our CVs, which turned out amazing, I think, and cover letters, and then any comment we would leave for ourselves as if what to edit on the CV. I got a comment back from her in 3 hours, I sent her an email just a couple of days ago about something, and she emailed me right back the next morning with just a bevy of information. So it's been really helpful to hear the resources. And then when you actually go and look for them, you got to take the time, but it's worth it. Get the response, because that's the thing that I hear too from both of you, is how inclusive and kind the international teaching community can be and wants to be. You just have to take the time to actually try to interact. So
I think another part of JP Mint that has been really helpful is there is different language of how to word your CV. For example, I have a lot of expertise in English speakers of other languages, is what we call it in the States, ESOL. And the acronyms are different internationally. And so she's been able to look at our experience and help us basically translate those into cover letters and everything, so that we have more confidence when we go into these recruiting things this fall, and be able to know that there's not a miscommunication here on what our qualifications are, which I think would be one of my biggest fears going into a different paradigm of education, because we all know in any education setting, the language changes and it is complicated and hard to follow sometimes. So we want that to be very clear. And she's been a pivotal player in that.
You guys are like our poster children for how to go about this. So good on you.
So there's a lot that you just said right there. And that last one, I'll work from there. One of my sons is an international teacher. He's in Rome and he's recruiting right now. And he's going to connect to Jacqueline, of course. And he realized once he got started, he didn't know some of the vernacular of international education, even though he grew up in it. So I think it's almost like building your own vocabulary sheet. Like if you were in an interview and the administrator says, well, what's your experience working with TCKs? And you go, oh, what's a TCK? Or if they say cross-cultural kid, things like that, that's going to be really, really important. And Jared, I'm wondering if down the road you have a future job in helping people filter through school websites, because you have to be a little bit skeptical. There's a lot of promo going on, and
Mm-hmm.
getting to what really is happening on that campus. But also on the shadow side, what can you read that they're putting up there, but they're not really backing it up, whether it be in their mission or they're just kind of surface level programming, things like that, that don't show a depth of effort.
Yeah, and one piece that made me think of when you mentioned that, David, is the idea of a nonprofit school and a for-profit school. That was something I heard on one of the early podcasts, and I thought, oh, I got to figure this out. Because at first, my perception was maybe a more negative bias towards the for-profit. But then you listen to some of the people being interviewed and you hear about all the pieces that go into creating a school, and what's the board's influence? How do they interact with the head of school? How do they interact with the principals? And that's a whole structure that is very foreign, at least to me, but I think probably to a lot of American educators. So that was just something that came to mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
And on that note, and I'm going to go back to that, you're building all this foundation of understanding. And then the carryover is, as you two are realizing, is going to be in the questions that you're going to ask. And I think you're going to show a lot to these administrators when you ask, potentially, like you're maybe on the third round and you're close to maybe an offer and you're differentiating, but you say, well, tell me about the board. What is their structure? And what are some of their focus areas right now? And things like that are going to be very helpful for you to get information, but it's also going to inform your potential next school that you're on top of your game. You know what's going on. So I think that's a huge plus.
I agree with you, Jared, that a lot of educators who are in their home country may not have heard those terms, for profit and not for profit, and may not be aware of the differences. But as David and I have discovered, more and more and more of the new schools that are coming up, of which there are thousands and thousands of them, are for profit. It's being seen as a business model that can work. And so you've got to understand the differences and be aware. And like David said, go to the website and look at their mission statement. Like Jared said, how is it surface, or can you really suss out whether they're really carrying it through their school? And then you can try to see if you can meet people, maybe through a LinkedIn connection, or, Hannah, you've got those connections of people that you knew that had been international teachers and your cousin. And so just seeing if there's any way, because like Hannah said, this is a wonderful community. And so in a lot of cases, if you connect to someone who's connected to someone who's, the 6 degrees of separation, the person that you get to in the end, who's at the school you're targeting, the experience I've had is people want to be helpful. They are really giving of their time. They're happy to answer questions. Now, David had an experience where they weren't always 100% forthcoming because they didn't want to trash the school they were currently at. So, there's that grain of salt you got to take it with. But there are ways to try to figure these things out. And you guys have made such a great start. So good on you.
Definitely. Good on ya. As Audrey says, I agree. All right, so we shared another blog post with you entitled Becoming an International Educator. And we're wondering, were there any takeaways from it? Or maybe you were so far along in your learning that you read it and go, yep, that's us, that's us, that's us, and that makes sense, or whatever. Jared, why don't we go with you on this one?
Yeah, this one had a lot of pieces that I had kind of started to put together, but it's good to have them all in one place. And that's why I guess I'd just echo again, go to the actual website and look at the resources. The one that caught my attention real quick was the Numbeo, the cost of living site. That's one that I was already a bit familiar with, but it can be really helpful because what you hear from someone about, like, I'll use a country I guess I'm more familiar with, like Greece. We had some friends go there recently. We've been there too, and it's wonderful. But you hear like, oh, going out it's actually pretty affordable. And it's like, well, what does affordable mean? And so when you pull up a site like Numbeo, you can actually see, okay, if you're in this area, yeah, affordable. If you're in this area, maybe not so much. And you can compare cities. And so that's when, I guess, just on the financial side, like when you think about going to another place, like how well will you be able to enjoy it? You really got to consider it. And so that was a good reminder. But a lot of the things I think that Hannah and I are interested in and had discussed when we were reviewing that seemed very familiar. It felt very affirming, which is great to read something and be like, yeah, that sounds good.
Well, I had a feeling, because you all are so ahead of the game, that it would be affirming and validating your, again, back to this foundational knowledge. And it sounds like you're moving beyond that now. Your scope of understanding is growing. So that's wonderful. Hannah, do you have anything more to say?
Nothing really different from what Jared had to say, other than I am a linear outline guidelines type of person. I love to see some basic questions to consider or things to consider. And so the post was helpful for me too, since some of our communication, Jared and my communication, is him summarizing things that he's been looking into. And for me to see it visually listed out, that helps me too. So I would look at that particular post too as a nice set of guidelines for getting into this and moving forward.
And I'm thinking again for our audience that we talk so much about the different pathways that students learn. And this is interesting, the way you two have strengths in different areas, and that going through the audio or going through the written, and then there are also some infographics out there, the multiple ways that fit. And if you are in a partnership, divvying up these resources, maybe that's another tip for listeners.
Yeah, I would say if you're in a partnership, you've got to find a constructive and positive way, obviously, to communicate about anything. But a decision this monumental needs to be handled at the appropriate pace. And I get really excited about stuff. Hannah knows this. She's very good at, helping me put the brake on and getting the list and the pieces in order and organized. And I need that. I got to have it. And so when we started discussing this more seriously about a year ago, there would be times where I had to recognize that she would need me to summarize something. I couldn't just go down the full rabbit trail. I'd have to condense it, be a bit more concise, which as a teacher, you got to do. And then there would be times when I'm listening to her feedback and she would help me see it from a completely different perspective and get it more organized in a more appropriate way. So finding that way to communicate, finding the right time of day, when your partner walks in from, I'm terrible at this, she knows it, but when your partner walks in from a workout or getting back from work and like the first thing you say isn't like, oh, hi, honey, how are you? It's like, so today I found out that if we go to blank, 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 our boys will, you just got to know when to slow down with the process and communicate appropriately with each other, because it makes it so much more enjoyable, even though it's such a big lift and change.
You've just popped a new blog post into my brain. I think I'm going to write, and we'll give it a couple terms here that people know. One is learning flow. So you all have been going through the learning flow and being very intentional about it on who learns which ways and summarizing when can you share. And then you're moving also into your workflow as you decide which schools to apply to, what your letters will look like. So thank you for that. I'm going to write a blog post on that. And this is another case where a life coach could come in, Audrey, and assist people just on those inner dynamics of communication. So another opportunity.
Yeah, there you go. Actually, I was picturing, as Jared was talking, a flow chart of some sort of here's some steps you can take to learn more. And, here's some different resources and so on. So I might look at throwing together something like that. So thank you for the idea. So you have both alluded to Jacqueline Millay, aka JP Mint, and her services. So other than, you've talked about how she helps with resumes and cover letters and languaging, and she is also helpful in a lot of other ways. Why don't you start, Hannah, and tell us a little bit more about the key aspects of your recruiting plan that you're putting together with her?
Sure. So she was able to reframe our entire resumes essentially into a CV format that is accepted by however it goes through the recruiting process for international schools. But for our first stages of this, all of them have links, because you guys are talking about potential blog posts here and things. We're talking about guidelines, things that have been helpful through this process. Each section, she has, check out my blog post about this. And it's addressing like how to make your LinkedIn ready for recruiting. I mean, it's definitely worded better than that, but each link really helped me as kind of somebody who's been listening to a lot of Jared's research and things to actually see it and get those recommendations and visualize them, because I'm very visual. We're talking about different learning styles, and I can go directly to those places and get that advice. And so it's also helped me prepare more and have a better background knowledge and context of the whole process. Jared, what about you?
Yeah, I think you covered a lot of it. Jacqueline does a really good job of giving you extra resources that she already has created. And it's really clear she enjoys what she's doing, because you can just so easily click on a link and go to the blog and figure it out. It would have taken me a great deal of time to organize my resume into a CV, into that format, and to know what different international schools would be looking for. Yeah, it's immensely helpful. Her website is very easy to manage. Obviously, I've mentioned it already. She's great at communication, very quickly getting back to you. Yeah, it's been, I think that was a point, and Hannah, correct me if I'm wrong, but it felt like in the spring when we connected with her, really June, when we connected with her, that was like a big stepping stone for us.
Well, that's awesome. I'm thinking now, David, we don't need to write another blog post. We'll just send people to Jacqueline's site.
I subscribe to her email newsletter, and I would say for
Yeah, so do
everyone
I.
to do that. And she is a wonderful resource developer. Like Jared was saying, there's so many, like going to ISS or search, they do have a lot of articles. Thai Online, we haven't mentioned them yet. They have a lot of free resources. It's been a while since I've subscribed to their services, but that might be something to look into. I also wanted to kind of shift us a little bit now as we're talking about the planning and now shifting more into the recruiting phase, kind of where your feet are on the ground and you start moving forward in this process. And we've been doing this so long, Audrey, it kind of gets normalized. And I'm trying to put myself in your shoes, Jared and Hannah, what it's like, because I do remember a long time ago, the first time, and how exciting it was. So if you could share, and we'll start with Jared, what you're excited about as you're going through the recruiting, or you're looking about what it might bring into your lives. But what are you also concerned about as you start interacting, whether through virtual conferencing with administrators in potential international schools or going to a fair?
Yeah, I'd say it's probably the most nerve-wracking part for me. Interviewing in general is a different type of stress for me in particular, but it's also good practice. It's another stretch zone in a sense. But for us, we've talked a lot about that just because time is really important to us, and making sure that we're obviously making all of our commitments and things that we have with our jobs and trying to plan appropriately. So we've looked at the virtual fairs, mainly the ones with ISS that are coming up this fall. We also know about the closest ones we can get to from Oregon here in North America with Search Associates, and then through the University of Northern Iowa. And so now it's a matter of us deciding where we're going to put our focus. And it's something we're still kind of in the works of discussing. So that's what I'm nervous about. And that's kind of what we're focusing on. I'm excited though about the opportunity, because it's the world. Like, you get to interview and meet people from all over the world, and there's so many different possibilities with every location, which is pretty exciting.
I like that. It's the world. All right, Hannah.
I think I'm excited, but also interviewing, it takes me a while to warm up. So I have a lot of practicing to do prior to that. And I haven't done a lot of virtual interviews. So just trying new modes of doing that too, I'm sure will create some nerves. And so that's a concern, but we'll get through it. And I'm excited about it because it makes it all feel pretty real since we've been talking about this for so long. And so I look forward to that. And then hopefully, as we go through those stages, we can also filter out an idea of maybe potentially where we're going. And that also gives me direction and planning and a lot of confidence and sanity, really. But logistically, as a mother, I'm curious to how it will work out. We don't have the flexibility we used to when we've changed districts or done different jobs. It's not as easy to just drop and do an interview. We have 2 young children and we don't have unlimited childcare. So that's a piece that we're going to have to juggle for sure. And so that's probably my other concern about it, but we'll get there.
So I'll share a little tip from my son, Max. I was talking to him yesterday, and he's going to use one of the AI providers to do practice interviews. So one is to come up with possible questions, and 2 is then to interact with it and go through the process and such. And so that might be helpful on the grand scale, but then maybe right before you have an interview, just do 5 minutes with it. You've already maybe done a lot of practicing, and do some of those relaxation techniques that we can do, and start off small and kind of get your breath within you, and then you can start feeling a little bit more comfortable. Artie, what do you think?
Well, the other things I was thinking about that you may or may not know, and aspiring international educators may or may not know, a lot of schools now are going to video interviews. So it's set up ahead of time and it asks you the questions, and then you answer the question, and it tapes you answering the question, and then you go to the next one. So that's another piece to be ready for. And then the other thing that jumped into my mind is, maybe you've heard this from other sources too, is if and when you go to the in-person fairs, a lot of times you interview together. And that's a whole experience in itself. It's really interesting, taking turns and not talking over each other. That's something else that might be worth also somehow finding a way to practice on. So
Let me just add a tip on that one. And also, once your partner shares something about his or her strength and they're promoting what they're doing in the classroom, be ready to add to that, because so often we're just not aware of some of our strengths, some of our talents, some of our skills. So be ready just to say, and I would add in, if I'm Jared, I would say, Hannah, don't forget that you are such a good listener and you're able to break complex things into simple things. So be ready to support each other that way.
Thank you. That's super helpful, that kind of looking at it as a team effort. We've had a little bit of discussion about it too. And luckily, that's not a surprise that we potentially at the in-person job fairs could be interviewed together. But yeah, we're going to have to work on that. But I think it'll go pretty well for us. I think it will be a better thing than being alone, to be honest.
Yeah, that's a good reminder, because I had heard that. And I think we're so focused on each next step that seems a little far, but it is approaching. But it is really exciting because that will ease the stress, definitely.
yeah, it is. It's kind of fun because then you get a chance to kind of breathe while the other person's talking, which is nice. So now I'm curious, maybe with your Spanish speaking, that's a bit of a clue, but are there certain parts of the world that you're focusing on, or are you open to a wider range of options?
Yeah. So I have a pretty big dream for my kids to also learn Spanish, since I'm fluent in Spanish. And I will start with, of course, that's a dream. However, we have done research and we've gotten a lot of feedback about keeping our minds open and being willing to look into other areas. So Spanish speaking countries, that would be great, but we are definitely not limiting it to that. We are keeping our options open. We are really eager to go abroad, and we have been to other various places in our own travel and loved it. So we know there's so much to gain from other cultures that don't speak a target language that you're trying to learn. So yeah, we are open. We have some areas, hemispheres we talk about, but again, we're going to see what opportunities come our way and what's posted out there and what we can find that interests us, even if it's in something that wasn't our first guess of what we'd like.
Yeah, I think at first you hear about international teaching and you just think like, oh, well, let's go. I don't know. Just pick a country. I mean, there's a lot of different, I don't want to favor one more than the other, but some people, they visit somewhere on vacation and then they think, oh, well, let's just go there. Living there would be perfect. And then as you do the research and you get to know more, that certain areas maybe have more of an appeal. They're more competitive, and that doesn't mean the other areas and the other international schools aren't great starting points or even just places to be. And so that's what I've really enjoyed with the research, especially looking at the school websites, what you can find out that they do. The co-curricular options, that's another term that was more new to me, is pretty remarkable at an international school. And so as Hannah says, the different hemispheres, Spanish being a big interest of ours, but then there still being other places that we're definitely interested in because there are so many different types of opportunities.
So I would go to our resource library, but you've probably already done it, and look for some of the regional organizations for Central and South America, and potentially even reach out to their directors who are there to promote those schools. One thing I'm going to get out over my skis, because it's been a long time, and I think it used to be in general that with Central America, South America, that maybe their recruiting happened a little bit later. I can say with confidence that in general, Asia goes early, especially the stronger schools really start moving October, November. So this is where Jacqueline's going to be so much help, because you two are very dynamic and you're going to be a great catch for these schools, that you might be in a situation where you get some offers from my hemisphere. I'm in Thailand. And you might have heard some things from some of the schools in Latin America, and you're going to need to make a decision. So I would just add that to your plan on how to deal with that. And then that gets to the crux of, once you start getting offers, do you really just need to move pretty quick and grab it? Because in general, they're not going to give you a lot of time. They're going to move on to the next person. I think I'm correct. That's the way it used to be. Maybe it's different. Artie, what do you think?
Well, I think it's a tough call, right? Because I look at Claire and Jamel, and they took an offer early on, and then other offers did start rolling in, including the one they really wanted. And so it's such a crapshoot. I don't know if we can necessarily say one way or the other, but schools are certainly trying to recruit earlier than they used to when we first started out. And, we've also heard that recruiting goes on kind of all year round. It's a rolling cycle. So that's a really tough one. It's hard to say, right? It would come down to the individual school and the preferences of the board and the head of the school as to whether they would prefer to take people quickly to just be done with it, or if they really want to get just the right people and they're going to maybe take a little longer about it. So it's hard to know, isn't it? But sometimes, you certainly can you don't have to say on the spot. You can usually say, okay, can I please have
a couple of days,
or how long can I have, or whatever, right? But yeah.
Well, let me throw one more in there, or do you see if this was true? One of my takeaways when our boys were young was kind of the general belief that in the end, in elementary, you're going to have that one main teacher. You're going to have your arts teachers, your PE teachers, things like that. But you're not so much in the need of a school with lots of programming and extras like you would in the middle school and the high school, with multiple teachers, a full-on music program, other co-curricular. So I guess one of my takeaways is, with young children, you could go to a school that maybe doesn't have all the bells and whistles and everything, but it's a solid school. And they have a great early years program. And I think it just maybe adds a little bit more flexibility, that you go in and you get the 2 or 3 years potentially with the Spanish, or who knows, you totally switch to Chinese. I don't know, whatever it might be. But that's one consideration I would check in with Jacqueline on, because later, once your children start developing their interest and their talents, you really are probably going to want that music program, that really fabulous athletic program, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just one thing to consider. I could be totally wrong, but that's just what's popping in my brain.
Yeah, Hannah and I have talked about that a lot when we get excited about certain locations and places. And Hannah, feel free to jump in about how important it is for our boys that we have a really firm landing spot. And I think your point, David, though, that idea of like, it's a really solid school. Sure, maybe it doesn't have all the, like you said, bells and whistles later on, but if it's solid at the beginning, we as educators know how incredibly important K-5 education is. And that's got to be a priority. But just something I wanted to throw in there, especially for other couples who are maybe thinking along the same lines.
Yeah, I think we would love to find something that isn't oh, let's just try to get into the system and then we'll figure out where we want to go after that. We do want to have it thought out, which is why we have been so meticulous about this process and taking our time so that our boys, I mean, this is going to come up in the next questions, but they're a huge focus of where we get placed to. So all of that is extremely helpful and can inform our decision.
So let's go ahead and move into the criteria that you're looking for. And very clearly, one of your top ones is helping your children thrive and begin their international experience. And so we have a blog post, we've done a whole show about profiling schools, cities, and countries. And we also have a recent episode from a panel of experts who went through that list and prioritized from their experiences which criteria over their long careers. And one of the big things is at different stages in your life, the criteria change. So let's take a look at that. It's very clear your children are going to be the probably top criteria that the fit is good for them. So what are some other of the criteria, some other considerations that you pulled from that list? Hannah, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so these are to start a little broad, but like you're saying, the kids being the focus, safety is our first priority, no matter what. We want to go somewhere that we feel that their education's safe, that we feel safe, which kind of leads into the country. We can't wait to be involved in the expat school community that a lot of our research has shown, there can be really tight communities. And some international teachers have even shared with me, oh, you're in a total bubble with other expats and it's great. And that's what some people are looking for. And we definitely want that. But we do also want the opportunity to learn about the culture of the country we're in as well outside of that bubble. So we kind of want to be able to balance the two. And so the country that we go to needs to kind of fit the criteria. And with that spreadsheet, we were able to really weigh out exactly what goes into that because it's very detailed. And we talked a little bit about this with Audrey before when we met earlier this week, that we really love that document because, again, it's like coming into a new paradigm with things that you don't realize. We've traveled, yes, and there's a lot of work and prep that goes into that in organization, but the attention to detail that you have created with that is so key in also building that confidence and helping us make the most informed decisions, whether it's getting multiple job offers or applying to completely different parts of the world. So yeah, country, safety, and then I'll let Jared take over here in a sec, but the school governance piece was an important one as well for our kids, but also as professionals. Jared, do you want to elaborate?
Yeah, I mean, those are the ones we talked about the most. The one that when I was listening to that podcast, as you guys were kind of unpackaging that tool, that spreadsheet, which I was listening to it and I go, wait a minute, they already have a spreadsheet for this? Sweet. I don't have to, try to make one, which I would not have done as well. Yeah, it's great.
For now.
Yeah, the one that struck a chord with me, and David, I think you spoke to this one, was infrastructure. Are you going to be able to get around if you're in a big city? Are you going to need a car? Can you use the public transit? That for me, as a parent, as a dad, I'm like, how reliable is there a subway? Is there a bus line? That's a big one. And I like to nerd out on public transit whenever we go places. Hannah can attest to this about how I'd in London look at the map of the underground, and just be enamored by all the colorful lines and where you can get to. But it's important. It's a huge piece because you're going to be there for a long time.
We also don't have that in Oregon at all. Yeah. So that's always been a joy when we've traveled, is learning about infrastructure of big cities. We don't have that same kind of experience.
Yeah, we've got a little bit in Portland, but it'd be nice if it was all over. And then I think the last one to round it out is the culture. And I don't want to use not like the attractions, like you're vacationing, but I guess being a history person too. What are the sites? What are the cultural festivals? What's the religion in the area? What's the interest of the local community with the expat community? I think that type of interaction for us, that last piece, is really important. We don't want, Hannah mentioned the expat bubble. That's nice, but to an extent. Yeah.
So Max and I were out in Chinatown yesterday, and he grew up overseas and he was in his element. He speaks Mandarin. We went to a tea shop, did a tea ceremony. He's a tea man like you would never believe. And it was so cool sitting there with my 27-year-old son speaking Mandarin and then watching the gentleman who's Chinese, his eyes widen. And then Max starts talking about the different types of tea. It was quite a moment as a parent to go, wow, that was pretty cool. That is really, really important because there are places you can go into the world where once you get below the surface of the glass and the steel, the buildings and all that, there might not be a lot of culture there. And for some people, that can really work because the expatriate community of beach ball clubs and running clubs and things like that can be wonderful. But if you want that history, if you want that authenticity of a culture, it might not be there. So back to the car thing, that is massive. Just the idea of being in another country, and let's say it is not a Spanish-speaking country, and trying to buy an automobile. It's not to say you can't do it, but that does come into play. But what's happened so much since our days for Audrey and I is all the ride-sharing services. That really can substitute for a lack of public transportation. So I throw that in there too. Audrey, what do you think?
I add the caveat if it's available, because there are definitely places where it is and isn't. Although, for example, it's available in Kathmandu. So who knew, right? But I'm so pleased that you guys have been able to use the spreadsheet and are seeing the value of it. You know, we really put a lot of love and blood, sweat, and tears into that baby. And thank you for the little shout out. That's really nice to know. I think that, as you guys said, as we talked about offline, you know, we didn't want to go into too much detail on the podcast because it could go on, but there's so many criteria there to dive into, and you probably could have selected many more that were important to you. So thank you for diving in there a little bit. So now let's jump to a different subject. How are things going with your friends and family who have, you know, at least they've been hearing about it for a year, so it's not just being kind of thrown at them, hey, by the way, I'm going overseas in a couple of weeks. But how are they responding to this plan?
I'll start. I think for some, it's been like a broken record. They all know we're really interested. We've been talking about it forever. Finally, you're doing what you want. And I think because it's been a long time, I would say would be some family members and nobody really in particular, but I think me reading, I just kind of drawn, I bet they think we're not actually going to go, you know, because we haven't done it yet, you know, and that's, maybe I'm making that up, but I think just that, you know, we've taken our time, but still talked about it a lot and asked, well, why not international teach, you know, as different conversations have arisen. I think with other family, it's kind of making our time together pretty precious right now as well. So that can be hard. And my older son's starting kindergarten this year. So it's just a lot of big transitions. And then it's nice to have kind of a cushion here as family knows that. But with friends, I think there's some confusion and a lot of support. Some might not fully understand. Some of our friends don't like to travel and it doesn't seem as appealing to them. So yeah, Jared, what about you?
Yeah, I would echo a lot of the same things. Everyone's been very respectful. No one's been outright confrontational. But I've been surprised at conversations I've had with family, and I'm trying to be very respectful to them too, because our family is also a part of their family. You know, obviously we have our nuclear family, and I can imagine on their end, it would be so challenging to hear about such a big separation for the amount of time and the place. And so I've been really, you see this side of them. It's a different way of them showing how much they care about you when they support your idea, even though you know it's so hard for them. And so I've had some good conversations. And we have close friends too that we've known for a long time that Hannah said, I'm sure they're just like, yeah, you guys say this every year, broken record kind of thing. But now they're starting to see how serious we are about it. And they've been, in the whole, very supportive.
Oh, that's good to hear. I'm just going to share a couple quick stories. So I went overseas and met my husband overseas, and then we had our son overseas, and my parents came and visited. And by the way, they came to every country where we lived, and they love to say, you know, thank you. You saved us on accommodation. You stretched us. Talk about the stretch zone. You know, the first place I was Ethiopia, and they never would have thought they'd go there. And then Saudi Arabia and, you know, Singapore, which they didn't even know where it was on a map, and so on. So there's that side of it. But when my son was born, they came for a couple weeks. And then the day they were leaving, my mom is holding him and she says, there's going to be a little hole left in our lives now where you were in it. And I just felt terrible. I thought, oh no, what have I done? But as I say, they've adapted, and they used to say all the time, when are you coming home? When are you coming home? When are you coming home? And they finally sort of accepted that, yep, I was in it for the long haul. It's an adjustment for everybody, is all I was going to say. But they've been overall super supportive. So.
And we live in an age, Captain Obvious, once again, of video conferencing, that I think it's going to be rewarding, well, it will be, for your family and friends when they hear your children, even though they're very young, tell the story about, we went to the souk, if you're in that part of the world, or we went and I was on a llama, or whatever it might be. And you set up a system for them to share pictures that they draw. You find ways to give the boys their outlet to share and communicate. And that's another way that they're going to grow. We're talking again off mic. I look at just these cross-culture kids and like just them getting on an airplane every few months and knowing how to work the entertainment system before you do and stuff like that. It's pretty phenomenal. The other thing I was going to mention is, this is way down the road, but we'll get to it a little bit. So one of the patterns for a lot of people is they end up, once they go overseas, and if they're going to stay overseas a long time, is they get a home base, like a cottage on a lake or in the mountains, someplace. And it can be just something maybe not put a lot of money into, or if you're like the smart Forgerons, they have a house and they rent it out the rest of the year. So, and we're going to get into this in just a second. So one of the things I noticed is coming back to the US and visiting everyone all over the place. That was kind of the first stage. But later we said, come and see us in Maine at the cottage. And it led to much more depth of our friendships and family because they're so scattered. It became a central place. So I add that to the discussion. All right, let's move on to what you're thinking about long term. And I think so much of what you're saying for our newbies, people looking at this, maybe one step behind you, is okay, these are things I need to think about. I need to process. And I really appreciate both of you just being so respectful towards your family and friends and considering their feelings and being, I'm sure, very present when you were talking to them and validating their emotions and such. That's all part of the transition process. So that's really important for folks to do. So right now, we know everything can change. Is just thinking about how long your plan is that you might go overseas. If it is shorter term, are you looking at sabbaticals from your current schools, or are you ready to simply resign and say, we're going to go for this? If you do own a home, are you going to keep it and just leave it as is, or are you going to rent it out? What are some of your takes there? Jared, why don't we go with you?
As far as our home, we would like to rent it out and then block out time, just like you mentioned, Audrey had done with her husband, block out time in the summers where we can come home and have that as a home base because we have so much family here in Oregon. And the kids are familiar with the area, and I think that'd be really good. So that's our first goal, rent it out a variety of ways, but shorter term rentals like Airbnb or VRBO or I don't know the exact name, but the nurses that travel and need to rent homes. And then as far as our positions, this whole process is very exciting, but it is also bittersweet because I am in a district and with a team that I really do. I just adore. I like working with them so much. So I think when it gets closer and more appropriate, I mean, we have the startup for school like next week. When it's more appropriate time, I'd like to see about a leave of absence just as a safe precaution in case something were to occur that we really did need to come home immediately type of thing. Go ahead, Hannah.
I think in my position, I've already talked to my supervisor that we've started this process. I am very open with, I mean, you can't always do that, but I felt that I'm in a position where I can do that and have a super supportive team that I work with. And so I'm prepared to leave my resignation and prepared to look at it year by year or contract by contract. And that's how we do a lot of our life. And we have had some long-term plans, but they're always flexible and loose. We are not the people that have to follow through with them just because 10 years ago we said we'd do this, but in general. So I would say we don't really want to put a timeline on, we're going to be gone, we're going to try it for 2 years and come home, or we're going to go back and forth. Again, it's going to be based year by year on especially how our kids are doing and how that works for us as a family unit, and evaluating and checking in about it each year. And however that plays into what the contracts are, if they're 2 or 3 year contracts, we will be prepared to cross that bridge as it comes.
Or however many bridges it takes to get back.
Yes. Or oceans, whatever it
exactly. We'll cross that ocean when we come to it. I love that. So as we wrap up, thank you so much for your time. As we wrap up, any other thoughts or tips that you'd like to share that we didn't cover yet? Let's, Hannah, why don't you jump in first?
I touched on this a little, and I think this started for us as a longer term plan. We talked about it for the first time of planning to have our kids in the States and then being ready to take them as they're close to elementary age. And I think for us, that's the time we needed to warm up to the idea and put it into practice. And I think it's been really good for us. And we're especially motivated, I think, just having that goal. We're both very goal-driven people, including with our marriage, including professionally. So that's something that's really helpful. And I think putting too many expectations on something, in my experience of life in general, hinders your ability to be open to opportunities that you may not like, but you probably won't regret trying something versus not trying the thing. And this is the thing that we absolutely will regret if we don't go for it. And so whatever happens, if for some reason it was a shorter term period than what we maybe pictured, we'll be okay with that because we know we gave it our shot and we did what we could and we were thorough, and we'll know it's what's best for our family and where we need to be. So that's one thing that we just feel really fortunate as educators to have that kind of flexibility, because when I talk about this opportunity with people of different fields or married couples who, are not both teachers, they can't even consider moving, even if they would want to. One spouse wants to, the other is like, well, I'd have nothing to do. It's a challenge. So we just feel really fortunate to be able to have this kind of opportunity. And there's so many schools. So there's a lot of choices and options. And that's pretty cool too, because sometimes we've had the feelings of maybe everyone's trying to move abroad from the US right now, or maybe, just different feelings of like the competition's too high, but then we have to tone it down and remember teacher turnover is real, and we have some years on our belt, and we are way more established in our career, and I think more prepared to take this on.
There were a couple of things, Hannah, that you mentioned that we've talked about and words we've used, goals. It's been a goal for a long time. And I think what we came to last year is we really were both on the same page that if we didn't do this, and you mentioned it, that feeling of regret. And regret, it gets a bad rap. I mean, it doesn't have a very positive connotation. But when you think about things that you really, truly do regret, there's pretty big lessons there as to how you could have done it differently. And you really wish you would have. So if there is something on your horizon that you're interested about, or you think it's on your horizon, don't let it teach you another lesson in that way. That's just something I was thinking about as you were speaking to that. And you covered, we've talked about it endlessly. We love talking about it because we're so excited. So, I don't have much more to add.
Well, we love talking about it. And we also are right with you on the family and friends saying, okay, yep, heard it before. we know. But we're excited for you. And, we'll try to touch base again at some stage, if and when you get a job and where you're going. And, we'll talk more again later. So thank you for sharing your thoughts.
All right. So how, and this is no pressure that you would have to reach out to people if they reach out to you or whatever, but it's always helpful. And I think with networking, eventually, if you're active, whether you've got an Instagram account or whatever, or a LinkedIn account, that people can follow you a little bit. Do you have a way that people can follow you, Hannah, online?
We are trying to really bolster our LinkedIn activity just through this recruitment process. So we definitely want to share our LinkedIn info, and knowing that it hasn't been as much of a need for our U.S. careers here in terms of the districts here in Oregon. However, my friends that are international teachers all look at their LinkedIn and I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to really up this. So that's probably the starting point for both of us. We'd love to include that information with you guys. So I'm Hannah Keene on LinkedIn.
And I'm Jared Keene on LinkedIn.
Okay, and we'll have those links in the show notes for everybody.
Most excellent. And again, talking to my son, kind of the next stages in his career is he wants to move into being a consultant. And who knows where you two, as such driven people, might end up leveraging your experience overseas or the process of recruiting, and you find a way that you're going to help other people through this process. I definitely could see that going down the road. So I did have one thought as we wrap things up here, and thank you again for taking the time. Hannah, I just love your use of the word pocketing experiences. I think that's so cool. I'm going to give you a little tailoring information. So in this part of the world, you can go to a tailor, get anything made for you. And so I invite you to come to Bangkok and to get some pants made with massive pockets, because the two of you are going to have so many experiences in front of you, and your pockets are going to need to be deep. So keep that in mind.
I love it. Yes. Thank you.
Yep. Come to Nepal as well once you get overseas if you're not far away. Like we said before, the international teacher community is just so warm and welcoming. And, we're always so excited to welcome new folks into the fold. So welcome. It's a little premature, but I know you're going to find something. You guys are strong candidates, we think. And anyone who's listening to this as recruiters, y'all want to call these people. All right. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us today on Educators Going Global.
You can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, and all the other usual suspects.
Please subscribe, like us, and leave a review on Apple and Spotify, and let your teaching friends know about us so we can grow our community.
Please reach out at educatorsgoingglobal@gmail.com and join our Facebook group, Educators Going Global, if you have ideas, comments, or wish to share a Going Global story of your own.
You can also find us on Instagram at Educators Going Global.
Please visit our website as well, www.educatorsgoingglobal.com. All our podcast episodes are on there by topic, along with blog posts, Going Global stories, and our ever-growing resource library. For now, this is Audrey
and David,
inviting you to travel,
teach,
and connect with us.